What's going on, baby? It's just like Wake Up Israel News with Chris Judah, and I'm going to talk to you guys about a lot of things that's going on biblically with Esau, Edom, and Europe that they don't talk about in the news. We all know about UFOs and chariots and stuff like that, and some of these UFOs can be demonic, and some of the people in the chariots are considered our people who look like us with burnt brass. But considering what's been going on with Russia and UFOs, Russia has been under attack with UFOs for a while. And we're gonna play this video first, right? Let's play this first.
Hello, Corsair is here. Welcome back to my new video. Today we will talk about Russia's alien contact. Before starting, I would like to say that we don't know yet how many alien species are visiting our world. Maybe some of them just gardeners, or they are observing our evolution like we are watching how worms are evolving. The worst could be that if Russians shot down friendly aliens, this might be turned for humanity's destruction. Declassified CIA report claims that Russian soldiers are zapped by aliens after they attacked by surface-to-air missile. Russian military shot down the UFO before they were attacked and killed by the surviving aliens. It is sensationally claimed in the declassified CIA report. The shocking report, which includes claims that 23 soldiers were turned into stone by the aliens in the UFO after they transformed into a ball of light, was buried among thousands of declassified files published online by the U.S. intelligence agency. The report in question, created on March 27, 1993, is translation by the CIA of a report from the Ukrainian newspaper Ternopil Vekernik. The newspaper report said that after Mikhail Gorbachev lost power in 1991, many KGB files made their way to the CIA, including an alleged 250-page dossier on the bizarre UFO attack, which included pictures and witness testimony. The report suggested that a low-flying flying saucer had appeared over a military unit in training in Siberia before one of the soldiers fired a surface-to-air missile, bringing it down. It said, 5 short humanoids with large heads and large black eyes got out. 2 soldiers are said to have survived, who described how, after emerging from the debris, the 5 beams merged into a brilliant white spherical ball of light that buzzed and hissed. It then exploded, and as it did, 23 soldiers who stood watching were turned into stone, the report claimed. The report said, the KGB report goes on to say that the remains of the petrified soldiers were transferred to a secret research institution near Moscow. Specialists assume that a source of energy still unknown to Earthlings instantly changed the structure of the soldiers' living organisms, having transformed it into a substance whose molecular structure was no different to limestone. A CIA representative stated, if the KGB file corresponds to reality, this is an extremely menacing case. The aliens possess such weapons and technology that go beyond all our assumptions. It is not explained in the document why the CIA held a translation of the Ukrainian newspaper report on file. My personal opinion is, the Russians made a big mistake. They already collected alien technology at Tunguska event. But why they shot down the UFO is unknown. As I told you, there are many alien species, and we don't know how many there are friendly or hostile to humanity. Hopefully reasons didn't make for humanity another hostile alien race.
Look at this stuff, man.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to put a like and subscribe.
All right. So another one I want to watch. Let's see. Let's check this one out. Then I'm going to go to another video.
Emily needs a photographer, an editor, and a designer. With Fiverr, she'll...
Жители Урала приняли испытание тополя за НЛО или метеор. Яркая вспышка в ночном небе вызвала массу домыслов у людей, рассматривались даже самые невероятные версии, от инопланетного корабля до ракетной атаки Северной Кореи. Как отличить тополя от НЛО, знает Екатерина Григорова, она присоединяется сейчас к нам в студии. Кать, приветствую. Ну, как возникают эти круги и необычные свечения от баллистической ракеты?
Яркий светящийся шар – это факел работающего двигателя первой ступени. Но сказать, что полет баллистической ракеты сопровождается и другими интересными визуальными эффектами. Итак, вчера вечером жители Тюмени, Уфы, Саратова и других городов заметили странные явления. По словам очевидцев, это был яркий светящийся шар, который какое-то время летел по ночному небу, а затем потух. В интернете развернулась целая дискуссия по поводу того, что же это могло быть. В социальных сетях люди высказывали разные предположения: НЛО, метеорит, северокорейская ракета, пуск космического корабля с Байконура. Все оказалось весьма прозаично. Минобороны испытала межконтинентальную ракету «Тополь». Она была выпущена с полигона Капустин-Яр. Условная цель находилась на полигоне Сары-Шаган в Казахстане. Яркий свет исходил от ракеты.
Когда боеголовка летит на гиперзвуковой скорости, вокруг нее образуется так называемое плазменное облако, оболочка. И вот она, когда рассекает вот свою атмосферу, вот такой вот.
You know, Esau gonna make an excuse for everything in the sky, right? Hold on. Make it a little bit bigger.
Отступный след получается. Ну, каждый раз немножко по-разному, там, в зависимости, какие температурные слои, какая плотность атмосферы.
Траектория полета межконтинентальной баллистической ракеты делится на три участка: активный, пассивный и атмосферный. На первом этапе идет набор скорости и вывод боевой части за пределы атмосферы. Последовательно отрабатывают двигатели всех ступеней. Как только топливо выгорает, ступень отделяется. Выходя на заданную траекторию, ракета активно маневрирует, и это позволяет уклониться от противоракет. Все ступени для этого оснащены специальными поворотными соплами. В начале пассивного участка траектории от последней ступени ракеты отделяется головная часть. Это происходит уже за пределами атмосферы, на высоте около 1000 километров над землей. И далее головная часть ракеты по эллиптической траектории начинает спускаться вниз. Самый эффектный с точки зрения наземного наблюдателя – это первый активный участок траектории полета. Работающие двигатели оставляют за собой туманный белый след в форме конуса, а процесс маневрирования дает эффект яркой спирали, прочерченной в ночном небе. Как поясняют специалисты, то, что наблюдали жители Тюмени и других городов – учебный пуск. Отрабатывалась телеметрия, проверялись технические характеристики полета боеголовки. Сам полет, еще раз отмечу, программируемый. Таким образом можно преодолевать систему ПРО.
When I need to grow my business, I use Fiverr. I've got a designer for my logo, a programmer for my website.
Hold on, man. All right, let me see. Can I find this video? Here we go. This happened 2 months ago. And remember, in Ezekiel, God said that he will make the mountains collapse and the hillsides fall. And cows and animals of the field will die and perish. So check this video out right here.
UFO alert. Siberian mountain collapses and Putin takes special steps. What is going on? Vladimir Putin has drafted in soldiers to investigate a collapsed mountain, quote unquote, in a remote region of Siberia, amid suggestions it may have been caused by a UFO crash landing. This is by Karen McGrath on Express UK. And this is the...
Now, why will, make sure you guys still here, will Russia say it might be a UFO crash? They can't say anything else, but it seems like Russia is at least admitting stuff about the unknown. But if this was Cricket America, they would have said something and blew it out of proportion or even changed the story. That's what's so good about Russia and those Edomites over there. Putin, that white boy gonna tell the truth. He's not gonna lie about nothing. He's not gonna sugarcoat anything related to Russia or anything that's coming against Russia. He's gonna say, you know, a UFO alert, a UFO may have crashed to a mountain, because this whole entire mountain collapsed. The entire mountain. Now picture that.
Video given by the Russian pilots over the area. It's not an avalanche, as you can see here. It's rock that has been sort of pulverized, it looks like. This is not an avalanche, this is rock.
Let's see what you said again. Hold on.
Whatever, this is rock. Rock that has been sort of pulverized. It's rock that has been sort of pulverized, it looks like.
Well, I'm trying to
sharing the graph on Express UK, and this is the video given by the Russian pilot.
Look how big the area is. Look how big.
It's not an avalanche, as you can see here. It's rock that has been sort of pulverized, it looks like. This is not an avalanche, this is rock. So whatever the cause, the event resulted in a massive rockfall, which has blocked the nearby Bureya River and left several villages at risk of flooding. So much rock was shifted, it would fill 13,600 Olympic-sized swimming pools. This is what the experts claim. So in the meanwhile, the falling
13,000 Olympic swimming pools. I'm not gonna try to calculate that, but imagine that.
Million cubic meters of debris, 34 million cubic meters left a gash in the mountain, which could swallow up all the water used if every American showered at the same time. The Russian army has been dispatched to the sea to try and find out.
Still there. We're gonna skip this ab, fam. They got abs all over. I don't blame them. They trying to promote this stuff.
And moved a 525-foot high mound of rock, pulverized, that is, didn't move it, which has substantially blocked the Bureya River, with village in the Khabarovsk and Amur regions at risk of flooding. The military has been tasked with removing the mountain, the rubble, using explosives and equipment to allow the water to flow again. Experts warn nearby rock is fracturing and a second gargantuan landslide is not ruled out. The Defense Ministry source said a group of specialists is en route to conduct reconnaissance work at the site where the rocks fell some 1,280 feet onto the valley floor. The source also said, given the significant size of the landslide, units of engineers and railway forces with special equipment, as well as Army and transport aviation, will be involved in clearing all this. Plans are being drawn up for the evacuation of 400 people from villages of Chegunda, Ust-Urgau, and Elga. The flooding could also disrupt a 3,000-mile-long Baikal-Amur mainline rail link, which is vital link between the Siberian interior and the Russian east coast, unless the army can unblock all this river quickly. To complicate matters further, a hydroelectricity station is also threatened because water is drying up in the Bureykaska hydropower reservoir located downstream. Russia also sent in teams of geomorphologists, geologists, hydrologists, land surveyors to assess the carnage, which seems to have happened December 11, reported the Siberian Times. Alexei Maslov, head of Verkhe-Burenska district, where this thing happened, said, "We're trying to find the explanation for the incident. I insist that it was a meteorite," he said. But the local poll in eastern Russia suggested while the 27% agreed with this assessment, more than 33% believed a UFO was the cause. Now, embedded here is the Chelyabinsk meteorite that...
Why is the percentage so high when it comes to UFOs, man? Come on, man. Like, look how big that open field is. You see that? And the people in the area, they know exactly how big the area is in the area. I mean, that certain mountain that got hit. The Most High say He's gonna be warring with these people, man, for generations to come. You know, and He might use these entities to go in there and zap them, or the Most High might have zapped them. You know what I'm saying? From the heavens.
Fell into the Siberia region. it seems to be getting a lot of celestial body activity there. Professor Dave Pedley, Vice President for Research and Innovation at the University of Sheffield, as an expert in the science of landslides, dismissed both ideas. He explained that the mountain slope above Borea had a pre-existing tension crack or depression at an altitude of around 1,900 feet, and he said we can say that it is certainly a rock slope failure, and that is highly unlikely to be associated with a meteor impact event. Professor Pedley admitted it was slightly surprising that the fall occurred in winter, when the ground was frozen, rather than at a warmer time of the year, because that's not supposed to happen. He warned local conditions showed, quote, there may be a larger failure yet to come, creating the potential for an even bigger landslide. Hunters who first reached the scene, alerted by a sudden and inexplicable change in the flow of the river,
Annoyed that people can't find your website on
Now, okay, wait a minute. We're going to skip this.
Nowadays, we...
All right.
reported hot rocks, on which they could warm their hands. Well, that's very unexplainable. Their initial guess was that the mayhem had been caused by a meteorite strike, even though there were no reports at the time of a space rock hitting the Russian Far East in December. Siberia has been the site of a number of meteor strikes over the years. As we know, the 2013 meteor was famously pictured over the city of Chelyabinsk in western Siberia. It lit up the sky and exploded at an altitude of 20 miles. And of course, nobody saw that coming.
You heard that?
Decades before this, in the turn of the century, 1908, the so-called Tunguska event flattened 770 square miles of forest in a remote part, again, of central Siberia. Theory flattened 770 square miles of forest in a remote forest. Nobody saw that coming.
Listen to this right here.
Decades before this, in the turn of the century, 1908, the so-called Tunguska event flattened 770.
So let's go to this one. Hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. 1908, right? It popped right up, fam. Hold on 1 second. I know I'm skipping videos, but I want you to hear what happened, okay? And when you hear this, I'm gonna do a quick one. I'm not gonna do it long, but we're gonna listen to this video. This is back in 1908.
30th, 1908. In a remote area of Siberia, the morning call
Make sure you're with me.
by an explosion.
Shalom.
The powerful blast was heard 1,000 miles away.
There was an enormous firewall blast, something on the order of 15 megatons of equivalent energy, which is roughly 1,000 times that of the Hiroshima blast at the end of the Second World War. This was an extraordinary event.
Because of the remoteness of the Tunguska region, it was almost 20 years before any government researchers visited the site. The first expedition to reach Tunguska was headed by Russian mineralogist Leonid Kulik.
When the initial expedition got to the Tunguska area in 1927, the natives were reluctant to show the scientists into the region because they thought the god Agdi had devastated the area because of the wickedness that was going on, and he had destroyed the trees, killed the animals.
Kulik eventually convinced locals to direct him to the blast location. Believing a meteorite had caused the massive explosion, Kulik assumed he would find a crater at the point of the meteorite's impact. To his surprise, there was none.
He looked for meteorite samples on the ground because often when an object hits the Earth, it throws up debris, and the debris is recoverable around the edges of the crater. But of course, he didn't find that either.
What Kulik discovered has stirred UFO debate for decades. At the blast's epicenter was a frozen swamp with an untouched clump of fully grown trees in the middle. Circled around the grove, 10 million dead trees lay in a symmetrical ring, seemingly mowed down by a cosmic scythe.
So here we have an enormous blast site with no crater, no fragments or meteorites around the rim of the crater, and this radial pattern of burnt trees knocked down for some 20 miles in all directions.
In the years that followed, others traveled to Tunguska to study the unusual occurrence.
There might have been fruits obtained by labors of another expedition sent by the head of the Soviet secret police in the late 1940s. But all we know is that such expedition existed. We do not know what has happened to the items and information it collected.
Further baffling ufologists were reports of radiation damage in the Tunguska blast region.
There were also some reports of mutations taking place in plant life, and even some humans apparently suffered some gene damage.
In 1947, Russian Army Colonel Alexander Kazantsev developed a remarkable theory based on information about the devastating consequences of America's atomic bomb attacks on Japan.
He was listening to the report about the nuclear bombardment. The announcer gave a very long and very detailed description of how and in which direction trees, houses had fallen, and so on, how everything was hit. He realized that what had happened in Hiroshima, exactly the same happened at Tunguska, only nearly half a century ago.
Kazantsev hypothesized that the nuclear-like devastation seen at Tunguska must have been caused by the crash of a nuclear-powered alien spacecraft. But the scientific community rebuffs the UFO theory. Scientists claim the Tunguska explosion was caused by a rare but explainable natural event. They believe an asteroid dropped to just 3 miles above the Earth's surface and then exploded.
There's always Esau's answer, right? An asteroid. He can't come up with anything else but that. That lie.
The object came in, it was being decelerated.
Now I'm not saying it could have been, but to exclude the Most High is very naive by the enemy.
Squeezed by atmospheric forces, it blew up with the force of a hydrogen bomb. The shockwave smashed down the forest, knocking trees away from the blast and resulting in a pattern away from ground zero.
But how would an asteroid explosion explain the reports of radiation damage in the Tunguska area? Scientists say it can be attributed to the sheer magnitude of the explosion.
As we mentioned before, the blast itself was 1,000 times greater than the Hiroshima blast at the end of World War II. The blast would have generated a series of very high-speed charged particles and would have been the cause of some of the mutations in the gene structures of plants and animals.
But to this day, scientific explanations do not satisfy many ufologists.
I have been several times to the place where the Tunguska body fell. I intentionally call it body, not meteorite. I mean, the catastrophe of an asteroid, of a comet, or of any other natural body cannot lead to such consequences.
A number of expeditions found things that they couldn't explain. There's some people who were saying that the evidence suggested this was some kind of an alien spaceship. That was the kind of magical explanation you use when you don't have enough real science to understand the physics and the astronomy involved.
That's God, fam. Now, I don't know about this right here. What's this?
Listen up. The soap you shower with? You probably haven't even questioned what bar of soap you lather up with. Let's face it.
Wait a minute.
Trappers watched in awe as a round and cylindrical object glowing with a blinding white light and a fiery tail streaked.
Are you guys okay? I just want to share this with you guys, man. Do a video with you guys, all right? This video, everything's going smooth, so let's go.
Across the morning horizon. At the time, the object was 6 to 10 kilometers above the ground, directly over a desolate region of tundra and pine forest. At 7:17, the unknown object exploded in a tremendous ball of fire, completely destroying an area of over 2,000 square kilometers, equivalent to an area larger than Los Angeles or New York City. The resulting firestorms lasted for several weeks, burning an additional 10,000 kilometers surrounding the flashpoint. This explosion could be felt several thousand kilometers away. Strangely, though, upon investigation of this location 19 years later, no impact crater of any kind was found. No one, until now, knew exactly what the object was that caused this massive explosion. Even after 90 years of investigation of this crash site by thousands of renowned expert scientists from Russia and dozens of other countries, there is still no consensus or even a loose agreement among scientists as to exactly what the object was or of its origin.
Look at the heathens trying to figure out what happened. These so-called heathens, Edomite experts. Look at them. They looking at each other, looking around. One dude back here asleep, dozing off. One dude looking like, okay, I think it's this. One dude looking like, I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm just here. He writing stuff down like he got it figured out. He looking like he's smart, but don't nobody know shit.
Recently, thousands of participants at an international space convention held in Bologna, Italy, failed to grasp any further understanding or form any unilateral scientific explanation whatsoever regarding the phenomenon. Professor N.V. Vasilev, chairman of the Scientific Organizing Committee of the Russian Academy of Sciences, admitted during this convention that it was most remarkable that the explosion was of a non-terrestrial object of still unknown origin, and that an unambiguous comprehensive solution has still not been achieved to address all of the problems involved in a logical scientific explanation.
A group of scientists found the impact point, and they found something very interesting, namely a forest that for many square miles had been knocked down, and all the trees were pointing radially away from the impact point. And at the impact point was a great big hole in the ground. Now, what's interesting about it is nothing was found of whatever caused the impact. There is the forest torn down, there's the great big holes, and nothing else.
Interestingly, the cumulative available evidence both supports and contradicts all of the explanations previously put forward to account for the explosion. Conflicting evidence supports many of the competing proposals, ranging from that of an asteroid, a comet, antimatter particles, contact with a mini black hole, and even a futuristic weapon discharge. Furthermore, some evidence that was apparently collected several years ago by Russian scientists had been confiscated and concealed by the Ministry of State Security, later to be known as the KGB, without a trace or an explanation. This program presents, for the first time, an account of this mysterious explosion by one of the last surviving eyewitnesses, and furthermore exposes the fallacies in the current scientific theories and explanations put forth to interpret what actually happened in Tunguska on that fateful morning in 1908. A colonel in the former Soviet Union's KGB now admits to being an accessory to a covert Russian cover-up to suppress and conceal crucial evidence. He further explains his role in the government scheme to conceal the conclusions reached by many Russian scientists as to the actual true nature of this explosion, that being that Tunguska actually bears the scars of an authentic 90-year-old crash site of an interplanetary spaceship of extraterrestrial origin.
Look at that
the role of the
devastation. Look at that devastation, fam. Look at that. Look how much devastation. Make sure you guys stay here with me. Okay. Look at that devastation. Unbelievable.
To conceal the truth about this event, as well as the virtual impossibility of explaining this event by any known natural means, seems almost identical to the event that occurred in 1947 in the United States near Roswell, New Mexico. And with all the evidence considered, Tunguska may very well represent the Russian Roswell. Just prior to the Tunguska explosion in 1908, observatories and meteorologists around the world noted a series of atmospheric oddities, such as the formation and movement of unusual clouds, as well as an unusually strong aurora borealis and solar halos, among many others. No one was able to directly connect these atmospheric oddities with the Tunguska object. However, the coincidences in time between the sudden occurrence of the strange atmospheric activity followed by the explosion strongly suggests that they must have been connected in some way.
All right, fam, we're going to skip this ad like always. And matter of fact, fam, this is very important history, okay? Hope everything is fine. Hope you can hear what people are talking about. This is very important history of what's been going on with Edom for decades or even centuries. The Most High has been fighting our battles against the heathens, and we don't even know it. Stuff like this, they can't figure out what was it. And even if it was an asteroid, it was the Most High. A comet, it was the Most High. But it was they said it was too powerful for that. People felt it from many miles away. It crashed. I heard one video say, I don't know if it was this one, but one video said that for 20 plus miles away, it shattered people's windows. Probably more than 20 plus miles away from where, from the end point of it happened, it shattered people's windows. And this happened in Siberia. All that acreage of land. Because Russia got a whole bunch of acreage of land that never been discovered, right? I'm glad y'all here. Shalom. Like, share, subscribe. I'm glad y'all. This is what Stephen Darby talks about as well. He talks about a lot of this stuff that go on, but we have to look deep into it, like what's really going on. That we watch too much television, you know what I'm saying? So we have to just stay on point of what's going on.
I was about 7 or 8 years old at the time I saw it with my father. We were farming in a little village near the railroad tracks. And I'll never forget how it looked like a long, round chimney on its side with a long tail of fire. I remember telling everybody I could that it looked at first like it was coming down, but then angled up for a little while, and then I was absolutely positive that it had changed its direction.
As many as 900 eyewitnesses living near the crash site gave similar accounts shortly after the explosion. Collectively, their stories made the trajectory difficult to explain in a logical scientific manner, since it indicated a maneuvering object. Physically, it is impossible for a meteor or comet to fall through the Earth's atmosphere, being pulled by gravity, then change direction. Whatever the phenomenon may have been, it did not behave like any naturally occurring object.
It disappeared over the next mountain ridge. And I remember like it was yesterday, how a few seconds later it seemed like the entire world ended. There was a flash that filled the entire sky, and it was like the sky opened up and split in half. I put my hands over my eyes and I could see the bones in my hands.
In modern terms, the blast was equivalent to 40 megatons, a approximately the size of the largest thermonuclear bomb. The explosion was so massive, it was over 2,000 times the explosive power of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. Given the remoteness of the area, the onset of World War I, and the internal conflicts within Russia, which resulted in the Communist Revolution, it wasn't until 1927 that an expedition was mounted to investigate the crash site. On arrival at the site, the members of this expedition were awestruck to witness the carnage and extent of the devastation that still existed 19 years after the event. Trees the size of telephone poles were snapped like toothpicks. The fallen trees were arranged in a radial pattern away from a central point, like the spokes of a bicycle wheel. There was no crater and no trace of a large meteorite found anywhere. There were, however, many small pieces of metallic fragments embedded in the felled trees which were collected for analysis. In addition, many people living near the explosion site were reported to have died of an unknown illness, showing symptoms not previously documented in that region.
I could not get over the fact that so many of my friends and family were getting sick, and many of them died when still young. They were healthy before, and I just could not figure out why they got sick and died.
Another occurrence that could not be explained by any natural means at that time was when the observatory, located 900 kilometers away in Irkutsk, Siberia, recorded very unusual disturbances in the Earth's magnetic field at the time of the explosion, as well as severe magnetic storms occurring just after the explosion. Satisfactory explanations for both the explosion and the resulting abnormalities were impossible until after World War II. Following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, aerial photographs of these cities were compared with aerial photographs of the Tunguska crash site. They were surprisingly and stunningly similar, with the notable exception that the Tunguska site was tremendously larger by comparison. In addition, people living near the two bomb blasts in Japan exhibited identical symptoms to those from Tunguska. Many experts came to believe that the people who died of the strange illness near Tunguska did so as a result of radiation poisoning.
Stalin was now also Hiroshima, между Tunguской и Hiroshima.
When Stalin found out about the similarities between Tunguska and Hiroshima, he went absolutely nuts. He thought it could have been some UFO testing a new weapon that he could make use of, or something that could be used against the Americans. Stalin just wanted to know what the hell went on out there, and for someone to sort all of that out.
In July of 1947, Stalin himself gave instructions to the head of the Ministry of State Security, later to become the KGB, to investigate Tunguska and involve the world's foremost rocket scientist and designer, S.P. Korolev, who was later to become the father and head of the Russian space program. Once the Russians acquired the technology to explode thermonuclear weapons, they conducted numerous experiments and test detonations high in the atmosphere. They found that such explosions in the atmosphere had the effect of disrupting the Earth's magnetic field, causing geomagnetic storms seemingly identical to those of the Irkutsk readings of the Tunguska explosion of 1908. Further evidence of a nuclear blast and residual radiation debris fallout was revealed some years later, when Russian scientists and experts found that virtually all of the trees at Tunguska underwent an abnormal accelerated growth rate for several years subsequent to the blast. This was determined to be the result of genetic mutations caused by radiation exposure. Korolev himself supported and equipped an expedition to investigate the explosion at Tunguska. By the late 1950s, a number of expeditions confirmed finding residual traces of radiation throughout the entire blast region. Based on the lack of any unambiguous evidence to explain this event by any natural means, Korolev concluded.
You know what's hard? Making unicorn pancakes. You know what's easy? Selling your home.
That the blast had been caused by the crash of an extraterrestrial vehicle. On October 4th, 1959, over 51 years after the Tunguska explosion, the event earned a belated spot on the front page of the New York Times. Russian scientists were reporting the discovery of radiation at the site, as well as the conflicting evidence found to explain the explosion by any natural means. Their collective conclusion was that the event was a nuclear explosion caused by an object of extraterrestrial origin.
Once radiation traces were found out there, my superiors instructed a team of us to lock down the whole place and to take possession of all objects that were ever collected from the site. We told all of the people there who saw the object years ago to say that it was only a big meteor. Otherwise, they would get a free ticket to a Siberian prison camp. We thought for sure that we would find some alien body parts, or spacecraft chunks, or nuclear bomb parts. And the last thing we wanted to do was to share any findings with the Americans.
Soon afterward, many of the scientists involved in this investigation lost their jobs or were invited by the KGB to a long-term expedition deep in Siberia. TASS, the Soviet government-controlled newspaper media, did an about-face and changed their official story and stating that the explosion wasn't a UFO after all, but simply must have been a comet or an asteroid.
We did collect some papers and samples of odd-shaped metal and rock pieces, but I never did find out whatever happened to any of that, or whether or not anyone else found out about what the story was. All I was told to do was to have people not say that it was a UFO. We had all of the material sent to a secret military base just south of Vanavara in Siberia, but I don't know what happened to it since then.
For over 3 generations, the Russians have successfully kept the truth from the world about this event. As a result, scientists and experts have been spinning their wheels attempting to explain the Tunguska explosion and crash site by natural means. The most popular of these explanations put forth for this event is that it was caused by either a small asteroid or comet. Both comets and asteroids are essentially the leftover debris from the birth of our solar system over 4.5 billion years ago, when the sun and planets formed from a ball of dust that remained after the explosion of a star.
There's another population whose existence was only discovered about 65 years ago, and that's the Earth-crossing asteroid population. The population of Earth-crossing asteroids constitute a giant swarm of objects, which may be as numerous almost as the main asteroid belt. It's just that we haven't discovered very many of them. It's just an enormous population. You have tens of millions, maybe 100 million, which are larger than a small house, just a huge swarm. Every once in a very long while, they can collide with our planet. The asteroid collision hazard is real.
As a result of the overlapping orbits of these Earth-crossing asteroids, tens of thousands of collisions have occurred throughout the course of Earth's history. One of the explanations offered by scientists is that an asteroid about the size of a 25-story building, comprised of a loose conglomeration of small rocks and minerals, entered the atmosphere on a collision course with the Earth. However, due to friction, the object heated up to several thousand degrees and came apart, exploding and disintegrating in a huge ball of fire. While it is altogether possible that a rock weighing about 1 million tons could create such explosive power, and leave some radioactive traces, there are numerous problems and evidentiary contradictions that thwart this conclusion, even though that this explanation is the cleanest and simplest one to accept. Normally, when an asteroid enters the Earth's atmosphere, it would heat up to incredible temperatures, and if small, it would explode very high in the atmosphere, or if large, it would slam into the Earth, dredging up billions of tons of soil and rock.
Perhaps the best known example is Meteor Crater in Arizona. That was made by an impact of an iron object about 100 feet across. And it exploded with an energy that we can estimate from the crater itself as about 15 megatons, about the size of the largest nuclear bombs. It left a scar. It's 50,000 years old, and there are half dozen other craters on the Earth of similar age that are also easily seen.
Virtually all of the other impact traces endured by the Earth are erased almost as quickly as they appear, such that all impacts except the most recent go unnoticed.
Any object larger than about 50 feet across, with an explosive energy then of the order of several megatons, equivalent to a large nuclear bomb, is able to penetrate through our atmosphere and to explode either in the lower atmosphere or at the surface. So when one of those penetrations takes place, we end up with the equivalent of a large nuclear bomb going off, which of course could do terrible damage.
It is almost inconceivable that an object the size of a 25-story building and weighing over 1 million tons would disintegrate into dust particles without leaving any debris of some sort. The Arizona crater was caused by a meteor that had to be only 1/4 the size of the one that caused the Tunguska explosion, and that one made it to the surface intact, which adds to the dubious nature of this explanation. Furthermore, a meteor would not be able to change course as many of the eyewitnesses claimed, nor would it be able to create the atmospheric oddities associated with the...
All right. We're skipping his ad, mate.
The object. A relatively small meteor made up of a loose collection of rocks could not have disrupted the magnetic field or created geomagnetic storms as did the object in question.
Recently, the suggestion was made that it was actually a chunk of a comet that smashed into the Earth. In fact, it never really hit the ground, but it blew up a mile or so above the surface. And that is exactly what you would expect of something frail, like a great big chunk of ice like that.
Comets are made of ice and rock. Their spectacular tails occur when the solar wind evaporates bits of ice and dust, and then blowing these particles back for millions of kilometers. Scientists believe there are trillions of comets beyond the furthest planet in a formation known as the Oort cloud, and that comets are periodically dislodged from their distant orbits and hurled towards the sun. Most comets make only one pass in the inner solar system during their lifetime. The comet explanation does account for the atmospheric oddities in that some of the material coming off of the comet tail could have reacted with the upper atmosphere prior to the entry and explosion. As with the asteroid or meteor impact theory, the comet theory also has numerous problems and contradictory evidence that tends to reject this explanation as well. Comets are defined by their brightness and long tails, so it is difficult to believe that a comet could sneak up on the Earth without any prior sightings from anywhere else on Earth. A comet consisting mainly of ice would not have been able to cause the geomagnetic storm or leave such radiation or be able to change course for that matter. Furthermore, comets are not known to contain radioactive material. Computer simulations clearly show that a comet of the size required to create such a blast would have disintegrated much higher in the atmosphere in the object that exploded over Tunguska. One of the more exotic explanations for the explosion is that particles of antimatter were formed over the Tunguska region and then exploded when they came in contact with the molecules in the atmosphere. It has been well documented in the scientific community that when antimatter particles come in contact with positive matter particles, they cancel each other out and can create a massive explosion. This proposal is based on the residual radiation left over after the explosion, the lack of a crater, and the lack of an observation of a mushroom cloud. This explanation, however, does not at all account for the atmospheric and geomagnetic oddities associated with the Tunguska explosion or the eyewitness observations of an object streaking across the sky, not to mention the lack of any rational explanation for where and how these antimatter particles formed over the region. These particles would doubtlessly have come into contact with the atmosphere much higher than the explosion. Hence, these inconsistencies and contradictory evidence clearly dismiss this theory as a possible explanation. One of the least likely natural phenomena proposed to cause this explosion was the possibility that a mini black hole came into contact with Tunguska. Black holes are tremendously dense objects, such that a mass the size of the Earth could fit into a space the size of a tennis ball, and have the gravitational pull so strong as to affect even light waves. Since the gravitational forces and mass required to create a black hole would be so enormous, it is virtually impossible to get a pin-sized black hole, and any black hole that might theoretically be bigger and come close to Earth would most certainly have catastrophic effects on the entire planet. Therefore, this explanation can also be dismissed as having no relevant merits. Since the available evidence is contradictory and therefore rejecting the meteor or comet theory of origin, as well as other naturally occurring phenomena, some experts have proposed man-made causes for the explosion. Among the most publicized explanations is the theory that the explosion was caused by a high-energy electrical beam originating from the laboratory of Nikola Tesla in New York, and that he created the beam as a demonstration for Admiral Byrd at the North Pole. Apparently, according to this theory, Tesla overshot the mark and caused the Tunguska explosion. The national network broadcast TV program Sight presented this explanation as the one and only means by which this explosion could have occurred. This theory is absolutely ludicrous and has very little merit at all. First, there were hundreds of eyewitnesses who saw an object hurtle through the upper atmosphere and then explode. Secondly, even our present-day technology cannot create the electrical energy required to mimic a thermonuclear blast of 40 megatons and completely destroy 2,000 square kilometers, not to mention projecting that amount of energy halfway around the world. Even if so great an electrical discharge could be generated, sending it into and through the fragile ionosphere would have ripped away and ionized half the planet's upper atmosphere and would have killed off all life on Earth. Furthermore, the pattern of tree destruction at Tunguska clearly indicates that it was a gigantic high-altitude explosion rather than an electrical discharge. In addition, the electrical discharge would not have left long.
Did you see that, fam? Just look how the trees was just laying down.
Long-term radiation at the site. Therefore, a Tesla weapon electrical energy discharge theory is also highly suspect and tremendously inconsistent with the available evidence. Of all the explanations previously proposed for this explosion, the only viable explanation for all of the
Amazon, Apple, Airbnb, all of them have stunning websites. Now you can get
these variables, as well as accounting for the Russian government's cover-up, is that the Tunguska explosion was not natural in origin. As shocking as it may seem, it is now proposed that this event was the result of exploding nuclear or ion-powered engines belonging to an interplanetary spacecraft. The eyewitness account of an object descending, then angling upward slightly, can be explained by NASA's own study of spacecraft re-entering into the Earth's atmosphere. Re-entry can only be done within a 2-degree angle of descent. If the spacecraft enters at too steep an angle, it disintegrates high in the atmosphere as a result of heat caused by friction. If the angle of re-entry is too shallow, the spacecraft descends, but goes back up and out of the atmosphere, much like a stone skipping across the surface of a pond. It is hypothesized that the spacecraft entered the atmosphere at too shallow an angle and was skipping out of the Earth's atmosphere when it attempted to change course, but then exploded as a result of overheating and stress on the spacecraft. The explosion itself and the associated evidence is not at all consistent with a meteor or comet chemical explosion, but is consistent with a 40 megaton thermonuclear blast about 6 to 10 kilometers up in the atmosphere. The residual radiation, people dying of radiation poisoning, the abnormal accelerated growth of the trees as a result of genetic mutation, the geomagnetic disturbances, the lack of an impact crater, the lack of any meteor fragments or comet debris, the suppressed collection of metallic fragments, and all other evidence concerning this crash site use only one theory intact. That is, the event occurring in Tunguska in 1908 was the result of an explosion of the nuclear or ion-powered engines of an interplanetary spacecraft. As early as the late 1960s, NASA had designed and test-fired nuclear engines for 21st century spacecraft, and continues to research the viability of nuclear-powered and ion-powered engines for interplanetary and interstellar travel. These engines would have to contain at least as much material on board, which could conceivably cause a similar size.
Now wait, are they saying they got nuked in 1908 like that?
Nation as that observed over Tunguska.
Well, NASA's been involved in the development of ion propulsion for over 30 years now, and very early they were able to demonstrate good engine performance. But because these engines have such low thrust levels compared to chemical rockets, very, very long burn times are required for typical planetary missions, on the order of 8,000 to 12,000 hours. So the hardest part of working with ion propulsion is demonstrating that the engine has enough lifetime for those kinds of missions.
The design and concept for such a spacecraft is not at all science fiction. In fact, it will be the design of our own human expedition spaceships in the next 100 years or so. Small-scale early versions are already being built for unmanned probes that will reach the outer limits of our solar system and beyond.
The NSTAR thruster will be used first on the first New Millennium mission, which is a comet and asteroid flyby. Subsequent missions in which it might be used would be small body rendezvous missions or perhaps outer planet missions.
In 1947, the United States government began a massive cover-up of an alien crash site at Roswell, New Mexico. Has for over 50 years continued its conspiracy to hide the truth from the American people. The reports of the U.S. military concealing both a recovered interplanetary spacecraft and alien occupants have made the Roswell crash site by far the most famous example of humanity's contact with extraterrestrial life and government cover-up. The Tunguska crash predates Roswell by nearly 4 decades. And even though no spacecraft or alien occupants were recovered, the suppression of facts and confiscation of materials collected from the site by the KGB In addition to the discrediting of eyewitness accounts, there are striking similarities to the U.S. cover-up of the crash site at Roswell.
It's not a resemblance, fam, because the Russian site had most of their trees was laid flat. So a UFO crash and almost like a fireball explosion is different. You can't compare the two. You're trying to compare it to, it's not comparison. You know, Esau, it's even dumb to even compare, you know?
It is only now, after the collapse of communism and breakup of the Soviet Union, as well as the warming relationship between the former Eastern and Western Bloc countries, that the true eyewitness accounts of the Tunguska explosion and subsequent cover-ups are beginning to surface. It is hoped that the further warming of relationships between Russian and American politicians and scientists may ultimately allow for a release and an analysis of the confiscated metallic materials still hidden at the Siberian military base.
I've been invited to talk on such an important...
In light of this newly revealed evidence and the rejection of all natural explanations for this phenomenon, the crash site at Tunguska could very well represent the most significant and historic, yet the most overlooked and almost forgotten discovery in the history of humanity.
Okay, the name is Donald Yeomans, Y-E-O-M-A-N-S, and I'm a senior research scientist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The difference between an asteroid and a comet, if you had asked that question 50 years ago, it would have been easy. You would have said an asteroid is a leftover rocky material from the formation process in the inner solar system. A comet is an icy, dirty ice ball, a bit of debris left over from the outer solar system formation process. But more recently, the line between the two objects is not so clearly drawn. There are closet comets, there are closet asteroids, there are comets that turn into asteroids. And so the population is really one population of small bodies.
What can I do to not...
The velocity of these comets and asteroids depends on their distance from the sun. The comets go the fastest because they can come from a long distance out.
Essentially an uninhabited area. In fact, we don't know of any casualties in that particular event, but certainly there were injuries. So the Tunguska event is something by which we can measure what would happen. It did not create a crater, but it flattened trees for, let's see, 2,000 square kilometers. Huge devastation and a certain amount of incineration, because when you have an atmospheric explosion...
Let's do something, fam. 2,000 square... $2,000 square let's just say acres, all right? Man, it's 490,000. Hold on a second. Almost 500,000 acres. Let's do miles, man. 772 square miles. Can you imagine that? 772 square miles of land desecrated. Wow. You guys still here? All right, cool.
Heat generated, and the trees would combust briefly until a shock wave and the air, the wind simply blew that out. There was charring of the trees.
Those trees stay flattened for decades. I mean, well, the landscape itself stayed flattened for decades. 772 square miles. All those trees just stayed flattened for decades, man. Seven 772 square miles is about half of Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. Atlanta, Georgia, the state Georgia in the United States. Thanks for watching, fam. Thanks for watching, man. You guys stood there, you watched it, and unbelievable. See UFO documentary. Unbelievable. Right? Unbelievable. The Russian Roswell. The Russian Roswell. They want to compare everything to the to this country, but the United States ain't seen jack. They haven't seen nothing of what's to come. That land has got judged somehow over there in Russia, and 772 square miles just leveled. Let's just put 772 square miles in here. 772 square miles. Let me see if they're going to give a state. Let's see. I see Rhode Island. Let's go up here. The Ocean State Rhode Island measures 1,545 square miles in total area. So the half of Rhode Island was destroyed, more than half. Was destroyed. Meaning that the Most High can destroy an entire state, even an entire planet, if you wanted to. Thank you, fam, for coming by. I'm gonna do another videos on some more stuff right after this. Like, share, subscribe, and I'm gonna upload a movie by Bill Cosby. Let's do it again on my channel for you guys to check out, so we all can just look at, you know, they trying to destroy another Hebrew like the enemy always do. So I'm gonna do something and upload his movie onto my channel for you guys to watch it this weekend. Let's do it again with him and Sidney Poitier and Jimmy Walker and George Foreman and all those old school cats. All right, I'm gonna do that this week. Maybe tonight. So you guys can watch it. All right. On that note, this has been Wake Up Israel News with Chris Judah. Like, share, subscribe. See you next time. Shalom.